What's up, everybody? Thank you very much for joining me. Welcome back to Tekin Builds. My name is Ty Campbell, and I will be your tour guide through this next build that we are just about ready to start. Our previous build was a whole lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed that one. Turning a short course buggy into a 70+ mile per hour asphalt rocket ship was a whole lot of fun, and I can't wait to get that thing back out on the street. But we now have snow up here in the mountains of central Idaho, so that car is shelved for the moment. We're going to dive into our next build. I have chosen an Axial SCX10 2 kit. This is the UMG kit, so it's the one that looks a lot like a Unimog. We're just going to call it a Unimog. I know it's not licensed as a Unimog, but it's close enough for me. I love Unimogs. Now, since this is basically a Unimog in my book, we are going to do it a favor, and we're going to put some portals on it. I got some portal boxes from RC 4-wheel drive. They are direct bolt-on for the spline version of the AR44 axles. Now, unfortunately, this kit doesn't come with those axles, but I already had plans for that, and it was another option part that I decided to add. I got some beef tube equipped AR44s from Dan Davidson at beeftubes.com, and these beef tubes are really awesome because not only are they going to let us bolt up our RC 4-wheel drive portal boxes, they also add a good bit of weight down low in our axle housing, about 1 3/4 ounces per axle, or about 50 grams. Not only do they add weight, they are also sleeved inside the axle housing all the way to the inner bearing carriers for the diff. So our axle tubes are going to be a lot stronger than if they were just hollow plastic. We've got a whole bunch of other cool stuff going on here from obviously Tekin. We're going to use a BXR brushed combo and one of our Tekin steering servos. I've got some Vanquish wheels that we're going to mount up with these MT45 tires that come in the UMG10 kit. And we are also going to throw some Night Customs goodies on the outside of our body, along with a really sweet wrap from Jay at SOR Graphics. So that's enough blabbing for me. I'm really excited to get this build underway. Let's take a look at what's in this box and get to turning some wrenches. Alright, so this is everything that is in our UMG10 box. We've got a sweet little Unimog looking body. Really like this little single cab. It also comes with the Lexan pieces for the rear. It's got a spare tire carrier area molded into the back. So this goes onto our rear cage. It's kind of a truggy setup to where we've got the cab and then a tube setup coming off the back of that with these parts to cover our wheels and also be the inside of our bed. We've also got a nice detailed out interior in the UMG10. There's a driver in there, and I'm gonna guess there's probably a couple different head options or some different hats or something in there to put this guy's head on. So really awesome. That's gonna detail the inside of our body out nice. And the tires, MT45s, these are 1.9s. They look like they are 4.6 inches by 1.4. So really good aspect ratio on this tire. I like how it's tall and narrow. It's gonna fit our Unimog perfectly. These are the kit wheels. They are a plastic 3-piece beadlock setup, and these are actually really nice wheels. I like the design on here. You can see these kind of have a military looking beadlock pattern on them. So we're not going to use these on this build. I've actually got some Vanquish methods that you saw earlier, and we're going to mount those up with our MT45 tires just to give this thing a little bit of a customized look to it. And the rest, all of our parts bags. This is all the tube stuff. And looks like some steering wheels and all your typical fun axial scale bits. Looks like there are a couple driver hat options in there. That's pretty sweet. Oh, there's a cowboy hat in there. Yeehaw, partner. Looks like this is our axle bag and our transmission. And this is everything for the chassis. We've got our SCX10 2 frame rails right here. So these are the backbone of the entire operation. And miscellaneous. Looks like decal sheet. Bunch of cool looking decals on there. Some rusty looking diamond plate and the window masks. And looks like a little 4-way T-wrench. So sweet, sweet. That is everything that's in our box. Let's go ahead and start putting this thing together, and we're going to start up with our axles. So this is everything that we need to assemble our AR44 axles for our UMG10. I've got the kit housings right here. You can see that these are a one-piece design with a built-in truss. The C-hubs and the panhard bar mount are all in this. Now these are beef tube equipped AR44s, and they're sleeved all the way inside, so It adds weight down low, makes our axle housing nice and strong, and it's gonna let us bolt up our RC four-wheel drive portal boxes. Now these portal boxes are really cool. They pretty much come assembled. We're gonna pop them open, put some grease on those gears, but they are machined and they come with 32 pitch hardened steel gears inside. They come with hardened steel shafts. So the rear has these straight shafts, the front have hardened steel CVDs, and they are going to basically bump up the ride height of our truck about 10.5 millimeters. So you can see that the axle line right here, this is where your stub axle would normally come out. And on the portal, we've got a drop box right here with 2 gears inside, so your stub axle is lower. This is gonna give our axle more clearance up off the ground. It is gonna raise the center of gravity of our truck a little bit, but I think we can make up for that with a little bit of suspension adjustment and playing around with it. To finish up our new AR44s, I also bought some Vanquish hardened steel AR44 gear sets. These are helical cut, and we're gonna go ahead and use these ones. They are 30 tooth and 8 tooth, so stock gearing for the SCX10, and the portal boxes themselves also don't have any gear reduction, so everything's gonna be basically the same. The Vanquish gears also are a 6-bolt design on the locker versus the 3-bolt of the Axial, so we're also adding some pretty good strength inside of our axles too. So we've got everything ready to go laid out. I'm gonna cut this bag open and get the bearings out, and we'll put our new beef tube portal axles together. First thing I'm gonna do is open up these portal boxes, fill them up with some grease, because usually the factory grease, there's either a little bit or way too much. I'm just gonna put my own grease in there that I know that I like running. And I'm also gonna put a little dab of Loctite on all the screws that hold the portal box covers on, because I don't want those falling off out on the trail. Portal boxes are all greased up and ready to go. There was some factory grease in there, but I went ahead and added more of my own. Now we're gonna get our Vanquish Products 6-bolt lockers assembled. The ring gear's held onto the locker with 6 bolts, thus the name 6-bolt locker. Again, Loctite on all the screws so they don't come loose. This will wreak havoc inside your axle if these back out. Once the lockers are assembled, we can pop the carrier bearings onto the locker itself. Then we're also going to put the inner bearing on the pinion gear shaft. We're going to load these gears up with grease so that everything is nice and smooth. We'll put that pinion gear down into the axle housing first, and then we'll drop our whole locker assembly with the bearings and everything on top of that. Make sure that everything fits down in there nice and tight. And then we're gonna put the diff cover on the front of the axle, and then there's 4 screws that secure it from the back side. Don't forget to put the outer pinion shaft bearing on, and make sure when you're moving these around that it doesn't fall out, because the drive shaft will be the only thing holding this in. Now we can put our Vanquish aluminum shock and link mounts on the axle. These come with their own set of hardware. They are marked left and right, so make sure that you orient them the right way on the axle. And once again, we're gonna Loctite into aluminum because we don't want screws falling out of our truck. Now the fun part, we get to put the portal boxes on the axle housings and turn these from regular old AR44s into portals with more clearance. They're a little bit tricky to get on. They fit really well, but you're gonna have to wiggle the stub shaft around a little bit so that the inner drive shaft lines up with the slot in the locker. And then you also need to pay real close attention to how you are orienting this on the splines, because you don't want them crooked from each other. Well, these axles went together real easy, really quick, no issues. The RC four-wheel drive portal boxes fit right onto the beef tube splines. They're on there nice and tight. I don't think we're gonna have any issues with them staying on. All good on the western front with these. They both look really good. Make sure that if you're putting these on your axles, you get the portal boxes in line. I had the fronts just one slot crooked from each other, so one had a lot more caster than the other one, so make sure that you get them straight if you do decide to put these on. So that's it, axles are done. Now we're gonna move on and get our transmission put together. This is all the parts we need to build our SCX10 kit transmission. I went ahead and laid everything out just so it's easier to find. I like this transmission. Axial came out with this one a couple of years ago. It's a little different than your standard 3-gear that you might be used to seeing on other SCX10s or AX10s. And this has the option to add a second speed, so you can basically have a granny gear, throw a really small pinion on it to gear it down even further for first gear, and then there's an optional 2-speed conversion so that you can have some wheel speed. And it's all actuated by a servo. We're just going to build this in the standard configuration with 1 speed, so it's locked in first gear, and then we'll just change our gearing accordingly with our pinion and spur. So building our transmission is fairly straightforward. Just follow those directions, you should have no issue. Make sure you pay close attention to the gear sizes. There are some that look similar in size, but they are different, so pay attention to those gears. Double check everything before you do your final assembly, like all your screw lengths, your pin sizes, and which gears go where. First thing we're going to do is build the top and bottom shafts of the main transmission housing. These are fairly straightforward, just a couple parts. Make sure you don't forget the little block piece that goes in if you're not going to use the 2-speed, because if you don't put that in there, there's going to be a big old hole right into your main transmission housing, and you don't want debris going through your gears. And then you're going to want to give those gears a good coating of grease to keep everything spinning nice and free. Once you have those built, you can pop them into 1/2 of the transmission housing, get them seated in there fairly close, and then pop the back half of the transmission housing on. It's going to take a little bit of work to get these to line up, but they will seat, and then you can put the 4 screws in the back and tighten them down. Make sure you don't miss the rear transmission mount. This is very important. This is the second mount that mounts it to the skid, and it screws on right where the transfer case is going to mount. So with that rear mount on there, we can go ahead and put the first half of our transfer case on, pop all of our bearings, gears, and shafts inside, give them a good coating of grease to keep everything nice and free and protected, and then we'll put the rear half of that transfer case on and tighten down the 3 screws that hold it together. The next parts that can go on our transmission housing are the motor plates. Now these just snap right on, and then you bolt them down with 2 countersink screws. Once the motor plates are on, we can go ahead and put our slipper assembly on. So we're going to want to stick those slipper pads to our spur gear first, and then on our output shaft for the spur gear on the transmission, we put the first slipper plate on, stick that little centering washer inside the spur gear, and then put that on the shaft, put the outer slipper plate on, followed by the tensioner spring, and then the 7mm lock nut, and tighten that down about halfway. So with our transmission mostly complete, we can go ahead and bolt it to our center skid. Make sure you get it on facing the right direction. It is keyed, but you never know. Well, this is a super easy and fun transmission to put together. It's pretty much done other than our gear cover, which needs to go on the front. But before we do that, we need to put our T30 brushed motor in so that this thing is just ready to start building our chassis around. This is also the step where you would build the Wildboar 8 HD drive shafts that come with the kit. We're not going to do that on this one. I've got a set of incision hardened steel shafts. These are universals, and they're going to complement our build really nicely. So we're going to install these instead of the kit shafts. Let's mount up our motor real quick, and then we'll start putting our chassis together around this center skid. Now that we've got our transmission, all the mounts are on and it's mounted to the skid, we can throw our T30 Pro brushed motor in using the supplied M3 motor mount screws. Make sure you put this in loose because you're going to need to be able to wiggle the motor around to get the pinion gear on the shaft and set the motor mesh. Put a little dab of Loctite on the pinion gear set screw because you don't want that coming loose out on the trail. Slide the pinion gear onto the motor shaft, and you might need to twist the shaft with a pair of pliers so you can get to the flat spot. And you can access that grub screw through the little access slot on the side of the transmission housing. Now when you set your mesh, make sure that you get it close, but you want it to still rock back and forth a little bit. Check it in 3 or 4 different spots because spur gears tend to never be perfectly round, so it might be perfect on one side and too tight on the other. You can also use a piece of paper in between the spur gear and pinion gear teeth. Axial shows how to do that in the manual. So you just slide that paper down in there, tighten down your screws, and then roll the paper back out. Now we're going to install our incision drive shafts, and make sure that you put the shorter shaft towards the front, which is this side of the transmission. The motor and spur gear actually face the back of the transmission. So short on this side, long on the motor side. We'll get this tightened down, and hang on a sec. Hello? Yeah. Oh. Just right in the middle of that build, totally forgot I have to go get a haircut, so we'll be right back. And we're back. So this is everything laid out for our chassis assembly project. We're gonna go ahead and get everything put onto the frame rails that we possibly can right now, and get ready to link up our axles and put our suspension on. So let's get to it. So the first part in getting our chassis put together is the battery box. There are a few extra parts that need to bolt onto this before we can bolt it onto our frame rail, like our servo mount and a couple of the battery box mounts. Once those are installed, we can go ahead and put the left side frame rail on. Then we'll put the shock tower on and mount that up. Transmission skid is the next part to go in, and the boat side needs to bolt onto the frame and through the transmission skid. Then we can put the rear cross member between the shock towers in and the rear shock tower, followed by the rear bumper. With one side done, we can put the other side frame rail on. We're gonna rocket ship through this real quick because it is just the same stuff that we put on the other side. And that is it. This is our complete chassis. I really like that Axial included mounts to mount a servo winch if we choose to, and there's also some really cool parts in here that guide that winch line. So with our chassis all put together, the next thing is gonna be our suspension and getting our axles underneath this thing, and we will cover that next time. Well, that's gonna do it for this time. We made a lot of progress this week, but as you can see, we still have a very long way to go to get this truck into trail running status. I'm really excited to see how these portaled AR44s work out. RC Four Wheel Drive did a really good job on the design, I think, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how those perform out on the trail. Next week, we'll get our suspension all assembled and put on our chassis so we can get a rolling chassis, which will require building some wheels and tires, and we will definitely go through that. And then we will focus our attention on that body. This is gonna be a big job. There's a lot of pieces, there's a lot of stuff to paint and a lot of stuff to detail. So I'm looking forward to putting that body together. It is gonna take some time. I can tell there is a long road ahead of me. Hope you liked the video today, and if you did, click that like button, share with your friends so they can check it out, spread the word. Subscribe to the Tekin channel if you haven't already, and hit that little notification bell down there so that you are updated anytime we put a new video on the channel. Thank you very much for watching today. I'm Ty Campbell, and I'll see you next time.